The wedding dress still had the tags on it when I found the note. Not a text, not a phone call. A handwritten note on our kitchen counter, right next to the coffee mug I'd bought him for our anniversary. The mug that said "World's Best Future Husband." "I'm sorry, Emma. I can't do this anymore. I'm in love with someone else. The wedding is off. I'll come get my things when you're not here." My hands were shaking so hard I could barely read the words. 3 years together, a mortgage we'd just signed, wedding invitations already sent out to 200 people. And he ended it all with a post-it note like we were roommates splitting utilities. "My name is Emma Collins, and I thought I knew the man I was supposed to marry in 6 weeks. I thought I knew a lot of things." I called him immediately, my fingers fumbling over his contact. It went straight to voicemail. I called again. Voicemail. By the 5th try, I was crying so hard I could barely breathe. That's when I heard a car in our driveway that apparently wasn't ours anymore. Through the window, I watched Marcus get out of his BMW. But he wasn't alone. A blonde woman stepped out of the passenger side, laughing at something he'd said. She was beautiful in that effortless way that made my stomach twist with jealousy and self-doubt. Designer clothes, perfect hair, the kind of confidence that said she'd never doubted herself a day in her life. I recognized her immediately. Sophia Chen, Marcus's co-worker from the law firm. The one he'd mentioned casually over dinners, always with that little smile that should have been my first warning. "Oh," Sophia suggested this new restaurant. "Sophia thinks we should try that wine. Sophia, Sophia, Sophia." I watched from behind our living room curtains as she touched his arm, as he opened the trunk to grab suitcases. Plural. This wasn't some sudden decision. This had been planned. When they walked toward the front door, I panicked. I couldn't face them. I couldn't stand there and watch him pack up our life while she waited in what used to be our living room. So I did the only thing I could think of. I grabbed my purse and climbed out the bedroom window like a teenager sneaking out past curfew. I drove aimlessly for hours, crying until my eyes were so swollen I could barely see the road. I ended up at my sister's apartment, collapsed on her couch, and told her everything between sobs and tissues. That was 3 days ago. Now I was sitting in the law office of Patricia Reynolds, Marcus's late mother's attorney, wondering why she'd asked me to come alone. Margaret Whitmore had passed away just 2 months before our wedding, and honestly, the timing couldn't have been worse. Marcus had been devastated, barely functional for weeks. I'd handled most of the funeral arrangements, the flowers, the catering, even wrote his speech because he couldn't stop crying long enough to put words together. Mrs. Reynolds was a small woman with sharp eyes and silver hair pulled back in a perfect bun. She looked like the kind of lawyer who'd eaten opposing counsel for breakfast and used their bones as toothpicks. She studied me over her reading glasses. "Miss Collins, I'm sure you're wondering why I asked you here, especially given your recent circumstances." My face burned. Of course she knew. Everyone knew by now. Our wedding had been the social event of the season in our small town. The cancellation had spread through the gossip mill faster than wildfire. "I'll be direct," she continued, pulling a thick envelope from her desk drawer. "Margaret Whitmore's will contain some very specific instructions regarding you." My heart stopped. "Me? But we're not married anymore. The engagement is off." Mrs. Reynolds nodded slowly. "Yes, I'm aware. However, this will was executed 6 months ago, when Margaret was still very much alive and very much convinced that you would become her daughter-in-law. She was quite fond of you, Miss Collins." I felt tears threatening again. Margaret had been more of a mother to me than my own had ever been. When my parents died in a car accident 4 years ago, she'd stepped in without hesitation. Holiday dinners, birthday calls, advice about everything from career choices to the wedding planning. She'd even gone dress shopping with me, crying happy tears when I found the one that still hung in my closet with its tags on. "What did she want?" I whispered. Mrs. Reynolds opened the envelope and pulled out several documents. "Margaret left you something very specific, Miss Collins. Something she felt you and only you, should have control over. She slid a document across the desk. At the top, in fancy legal lettering, it read, "Last Will and Testament of Margaret Elizabeth Whitmore." My eyes scanned the page, but the legal jargon was swimming together. Mrs. Reynolds seemed to understand my confusion. "Let me translate," she said with a slight smile. "Margaret has left you her family estate, the house, the grounds, and all contents therein. Approximately $2.3 million in assets." I stared at her. "I'm sorry, what?" "The estate goes to you, Miss Collins. Not to Marcus, not to his father, to you." My mind reeled. The Whitmore estate was a sprawling Victorian mansion on 15 acres just outside town. It had been in Marcus's family for 4 generations. It was where we'd planned to have our wedding reception, where Marcus had proposed to me in the rose garden his great-grandmother had planted. But why? Why not Marcus? He's her son. Mrs. Reynolds leaned back in her chair. Margaret was very clear in her reasoning. She felt that Marcus had grown entitled and selfish over the years. She was particularly concerned about his relationship with money and his treatment of those he considered beneath him. She wanted the family legacy to go to someone who would honor it. I thought about all the times I'd watched Marcus dismiss waiters, snap at customer service representatives, make jokes about people who couldn't afford the things we took for granted. I'd always made excuses for him, told myself he was just stressed from work. "There's more," Mrs. Reynolds continued. "Marcus doesn't know about this provision yet. As far as he's aware, he inherits everything. The will reading is scheduled for tomorrow afternoon." Tomorrow, my stomach dropped. He's going to hate me. "Miss Collins, may I ask you something personal?" I nodded, still in shock. "Did you know about Sophia Chen before today?" The question hit me like a slap. Before today? I found out 3 days ago when he left me a note and showed up with her to pack his things. Mrs. Reynolds made a small noise, something between sympathy and disgust. "I see. Well, that makes this next part rather interesting." She pulled out another document. Margaret hired a private investigator 6 months ago. She suspected Marcus was being unfaithful and wanted proof before making her final will. My blood turned to ice. 6 months ago? According to the investigator's report, Marcus has been having an affair with Miss Chen for approximately 8 months. There are photographs, hotel receipts, credit card statements. Margaret had quite a comprehensive file. 8 months. While I was planning our wedding, choosing flowers, tasting cakes, Margaret was watching her son betray me and documenting every moment of it. "She wanted you to have these," Mrs. Reynolds said, sliding a manila folder across the desk. "She felt you deserved to know the truth." I opened the folder with trembling hands. The first photograph showed Marcus and Sophia at a restaurant I'd never been to, his hand covering hers across the table. The date stamp read 7 months ago, the same week I'd been addressing Save the Date cards. There were dozens of photos. Marcus and Sophia entering a hotel, coming out of her apartment, kissing in his car in the parking lot of his office building, the parking lot where I dropped him off lunch just last month, worried he wasn't eating enough because of work stress. The final document in the folder was a receipt from Tiffany & Company dated 2 weeks ago. A diamond necklace, nearly $3,000. The same necklace I'd seen around Sophia's neck when she got out of his car 3 days ago. Mrs. Reynolds was watching my face carefully. "Margaret left specific instructions about timing. She wanted you to have this information before the will reading tomorrow. She felt you deserved to go in with full knowledge of the situation." I closed the folder, my hands surprisingly steady now. The shock was wearing off, replaced by something harder, colder. What happens at the will reading? The family will gather to hear the will's contents. Marcus, his father Robert, his sister Jennifer, and a few close family friends. As the primary beneficiary, you're required to be present. And Marcus doesn't know? Marcus expects to inherit the estate. He's already made plans, from what I understand. Something about selling the property to developers. My heart clenched. Margaret's rose garden turned into a strip mall. The library where she taught me to play chess, bulldozed for a parking lot. 4 generations of family history, erased for a quick profit. There's one more thing, Miss Collins. Mrs. Reynolds opened her desk drawer again and pulled out a sealed envelope with my name written in Margaret's familiar handwriting. She left this for you personally. I opened it with careful fingers. Margaret's voice seemed to speak from the page. My dearest Emma, if you're reading this, then I am gone and my suspicions about Marcus have proven correct. I am so sorry, sweetheart. I know how much you love him, and I know how much this will hurt. I want you to know that none of this is your fault. You have been the daughter I never had, and watching Marcus treat you poorly while carrying on with another woman has broken my heart. You deserve so much better. The estate is yours now. I know it seems overwhelming, but I've watched you care for others your entire adult life. You cared for your parents before they passed. You've cared for Marcus even when he didn't deserve it. You even cared for me in my final months, bringing me soup when I was sick and listening to my stories about the garden. I trust you to honor our family's legacy better than my own son would. The house has seen so much love over the years. I know you'll fill it with love again. Be strong tomorrow, sweetheart. Remember that you are worth more than Marcus ever understood. All my love, Margaret. I folded the letter carefully, feeling something shift inside my chest. The devastation of the past 3 days was still there, but underneath it was something new, something that felt like power. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about the will reading, about Marcus's face when he found out. Part of me felt guilty. Another part of me felt like maybe, just maybe, this was the universe's way of balancing the scales. I spent the morning at the Whitmore estate, using the key Margaret had given me months ago when she'd asked me to check on the house while she was in the hospital. I walked through rooms filled with antiques and family portraits, imagining what it would be like to actually live here instead of just visiting. The rose garden was in full bloom. Margaret's favorite varieties, David Austin roses in soft pinks and creams, climbing roses covering the old stone walls. I sat on the bench where Marcus had proposed, remembering how he'd talked about our future. Our children playing in this garden, growing old together in this house. All lies, apparently. At 2 p.m. sharp, I walked into Mrs. Reynolds' conference room. Marcus was already there, fidgeting with his phone. He looked up when I entered, and I saw confusion flash across his face. Emma, what are you doing here? Before I could answer, his father Robert stood up from across the table. Emma, dear, I'm so sorry about everything. You didn't need to come today. Marcus's sister Jennifer gave me a sympathetic smile. Emma, I know this is awkward, but really, you don't have to put yourself through this. I took a seat at the far end of the table, my hands folded calmly in my lap. Mrs. Reynolds asked me to be here. Marcus looked confused. But why would she? Mom didn't leave you anything. I mean, she loved you, but legally? Mrs. Reynolds entered the room carrying a stack of documents, her expression professional and unreadable. Thank you all for coming. We're here for the reading of Margaret Elizabeth Whitmore's last will and testament. She began with the smaller bequests. Jennifer inherited Margaret's jewelry. Robert received some stocks and bonds. A few family friends got personal mementos. Marcus was practically vibrating with impatience. I could see him calculating in his head, probably thinking about the developers he'd already spoken to, the offers he'd already considered. Now, Mrs. Reynolds continued, we come to the matter of the family estate, including the house, grounds, and all contents. Marcus sat up straighter. This was it. This was what he'd been waiting for. Margaret Elizabeth Whitmore leaves the entirety of her estate, valued at approximately $2.3 million, to Emma Marie Collins. The silence in the room was deafening. Marcus blinked. I'm sorry, what? The estate goes to Miss Collins, along with all bank accounts, investments, and personal property not otherwise specified. That's impossible. Marcus's voice was rising. Emma's not even family. We broke up. The engagement is off. Mrs. Reynolds looked at him calmly. The will was executed 6 months ago, when your mother was of sound mind and body. Her instructions are quite clear and legally binding. Robert was staring at me with an expression I couldn't read. Jennifer looked shocked, but not angry, more curious than anything. Marcus stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. This is insane. She's trying to steal my inheritance. Emma, tell them. Tell them you don't want it. I stood up slowly, feeling every eye in the room on me. Actually, Marcus, I think I do want it. His face went white, then red. You can't be serious. Emma, come on. We had a fight, okay? Couples fight. This doesn't have to end everything between us. I almost laughed. A fight. He was calling his 8-month affair and sudden abandonment a fight. Margaret left me a letter, I said quietly. She knew about Sophia. The color drained from his face completely. She knew about the hotels, the restaurants, the jewelry. She had you followed for months, Marcus. She knew exactly what kind of man you really are. Jennifer gasped. Robert closed his eyes and shook his head slowly. Marcus looked around the room desperately. You don't understand. Sophia and I, it's complicated. Emma, I never meant for you to get hurt. 8 months, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. You were planning our wedding while you were sleeping with her. I was addressing invitations while you were buying her $3,000 necklaces. The room was so quiet I could hear the clock ticking on the wall. Marcus took a step toward me. Emma, please. We can work this out. I made a mistake, okay? I'll end things with Sophia. We can postpone the wedding, go to counseling. I looked at this man I'd thought I'd spend my life with. This man I'd consoled when he cried about his mother's death, while he was cheating on me with his co-worker. This man who'd left me a post-it note and moved his girlfriend into our house while the ink was still wet. No, I said simply. No, Marcus. We can't work this out. Your mother saw who you really are, even if I was too blind to see it. She trusted me with her family's legacy because she knew you'd destroy it for a quick profit. His expression shifted from pleading to angry. So that's it? You're going to steal my family's house? 4 generations, Emma. 4 generations of my family, and you're just going to take it? I'm not stealing anything. Your mother gave it to me, legally, because she knew I'd take care of it. Marcus slammed his hand on the table. This is ridiculous. I'm contesting the will. I'll tie this up in court for years. You'll spend more on legal fees than the house is worth. Mrs. Reynolds cleared her throat. Mr. Whitmore, I should mention that your mother anticipated this reaction. The will includes a provision that if any heir contests its contents, they forfeit any and all bequests, including the smaller items that would otherwise go to you. Marcus stared at her. What smaller items? Your mother's wedding ring, which she left to you specifically. Her father's watch, several family heirlooms. Contest the will, and you lose everything. I watched Marcus struggle with this information, his face cycling through emotions like a slot machine. Finally, he turned back to me, his voice taking on a tone I'd heard him use with difficult clients. Emma, be reasonable. You don't even want that house. It's too big, too expensive to maintain. The property taxes alone are more than most people make in a year. What are you going to do? Rattle around in a 15-room mansion by yourself? He wasn't wrong about the house being big, but as I thought about it, I realized I could see a future there. Margaret's library could become a reading room for the local book club. The conservatory would make a perfect space for the art classes I'd always wanted to teach. Maybe I'd open it for events, weddings for couples who couldn't afford the country club fees. I'll figure it out, I said. Marcus's composure finally cracked completely. This is insane. You're doing this out of spite. You want to punish me? Fine, but don't ruin your own life to do it. Ruin my life? I felt something snap inside me. Marcus, you left me a post-it note. A post-it note. After 3 years together, after I planned our entire wedding, after I held your hand through your mother's funeral while you were texting your girlfriend. You ended our relationship with a post-it note, and moved her into our house before my side of the bed was even cold. Jennifer was staring at her brother like she'd never seen him before. "Marcus, is that true? You left Emma a note." He deflated slightly. "It wasn't like that." "It was exactly like that," I said. "And now you want to talk to me about being reasonable? About working things out? You had 8 months to work things out. You chose Sophia instead." Robert finally spoke, his voice heavy with disappointment. "Son, your mother was a wise woman. If she felt Miss Collins deserved the house more than you do, well, maybe you should ask yourself why that is." Marcus looked around the room one more time, seeing no allies, no support, no way to charm or manipulate his way out of the situation. It was probably the first time in his life that his smile and his trust fund couldn't solve his problems. "Fine," he said finally. "Keep the house, Emma. Keep all of it. But don't come crying to me when you realize you can't handle it." He stormed out of the conference room, slamming the door behind him. Through the window, I watched him get into his BMW and speed away. Mrs. Reynolds was smiling slightly. "Well, that went about as expected." Jennifer approached me hesitantly. "Emma, I'm really sorry about my brother. What he did to you, it was awful. But I'm glad the house is going to someone who will love it the way Mom did." Robert nodded in agreement. "Margaret talked about you constantly in her final months. She said you were the only one who really listened to her stories about the garden, about the family history. She'd be happy knowing it's in your hands." That evening, I drove to the estate and sat in Margaret's rose garden as the sun set. I called my sister to tell her everything, and for the first time in days, I found myself laughing instead of crying. "So you're really keeping it?" she asked. "The whole thing?" "I think so. It feels right somehow. Like maybe this is what was supposed to happen." "And Marcus." I thought about that for a moment, watching the last light fade from the sky. I feel sorry for him, actually. He had everything. A woman who loved him, a mother who adored him, a family legacy to be proud of. And he threw it all away because he thought he deserved more, or better, or different. He'll probably never understand what he lost. 2 weeks later, I moved into the Whitmore estate. I turned Margaret's sewing room into my art studio and started offering painting classes to local seniors. I opened the gardens for charity events and small weddings. I kept Margaret's rose garden exactly as she'd left it, except for one small addition: a bench with a plaque that read, "In memory of Margaret Whitmore, who knew the true meaning of family." Marcus and Sophia lasted another 3 months before she left him for someone with better career prospects. He moved back in with his father and took a job at a smaller law firm across town. Sometimes I see him at the grocery store or the bank, and he always looks away quickly, like he's ashamed. I don't feel angry anymore. I don't feel vindicated or victorious. Mostly, I feel grateful. Grateful that Margaret saw what I couldn't see. That she loved me enough to save me from a life with someone who would never truly value me. The house is full of life now in a way it hasn't been for years. Book clubs meet in the library. Art students fill the conservatory with laughter and creativity. Couples exchange vows in the rose garden, surrounded by the flowers Margaret tended with such care. And sometimes, when I'm walking through the halls at night, I swear I can feel her presence, approving of the love and laughter that fill her home once again. They say the best revenge is living well. I'm not sure this was revenge exactly, but I am sure that Margaret Whitmore gave me more than just a house and some money. She gave me a second chance at life, and the wisdom to recognize my own worth. Not bad for a Post-it note breakup.